LinkedIn Echo Chamber. This is ML's Like Teen Spirit. Today we have George with us. George, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm really good. And where are you dialing in from, George?
So I'm in the East Midlands, so near Nottingham.
East Midlands near Nottingham. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you
Yeah.
for the support. George, this is the first time you've been on. And I have a tradition of a little bit of an intro, please, when people join us. So for 1 minute or two, we'd love to know, where you started your journey. I see you're ahead of AI. You're the only head of AI that I know, so you've got a great job title. I'd love for you to take us from, when you started your career, where you worked, what you did, and what's led you to this point.
Cool, thank you. So I started in data analytics about 12 or 13 years ago, something like that. And then sort of moved into data science, then had more of a focus on AI and using different types of data to solve various different problems. And currently, as you say, I'm head of AI at Smarter.ai. So what we do at Smarter is we have built an AI marketplace, and where it's a little bit different is that it's more geared towards business users rather than data scientists. So, you've got things like Hugging Face, which is great if you're a data scientist and you know Python or JavaScript or a programming language. This is really a lot more UI based. So you just bring your data, hook it up, and take advantage of the AI that we've built into the platform.
Okay, so I think of it as like I always remember when you couldn't have your own website as a business. You'd have to go to an agency. You can have your own website now. I remember you couldn't have your own marketplace. You can set your own marketplace up. So you're in the space of allowing people to jump on with some data that they have and create something usable that's AI or machine learning based and get going on their own. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got loads of different apps in the marketplace. They range from things like predicting churn based on Shopify data to generating emails that can go directly into Klaviyo based on customer information, all that sort of good stuff. We're doing a lot of stuff with chatbots at the moment as well.
George, great link. It's almost as if you knew what you're about to say. So you're into large language models, which is where we want to take it today. So when I asked you to join me on this, you told me about a great project that you're doing. Smarter are sort of in the scale-up type space, startup scale-up space. You told me that you're trying to provide an offering for small, medium-sized brands. And one of the things that exists in that space is really, fundraising, making sure you can keep going,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So you told me about a chatbot project. Could you give us an overview of it, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So where this all came from basically was at Smarter, we were trying to fundraise, finding it very, very difficult throughout last year, as everybody was. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market for a variety of reasons that I won't go into, but fundraising is very, very difficult. So we built a tool really for ourselves that would allow us to push in all of the data that's in our data room, which is things like business plans, financial models, information about the founders, and the entire website that we've got as well, which is like 150 pages. Feed and then make all of that accessible to a large language model. And then we've given VCs the ability to query our data room with natural language. And we saw some really good benefits from that. So the first one was it means that we spend less time filling out questionnaires, which have largely the same questions asked in slightly different ways. Mm-hmm. So our founder, Fran, who is our founder and CEO, Fran, has found that it's taking him a lot less time to do the outreach to VCs now. But it also means that VCs can find the information that they want very, very quickly. So rather than having to, receive hundreds of pages worth of documents and then scour through them and decide whether or not that's a good use of their time for this investment, they can just ask a few questions very, very quickly, get the answers that they want, and it just speeds up that decision-making process. Because we've seen a lot of success with this, we decided to then make it available to others as well. And we're just going through the launch of that. We've got the wait list live on the website at the moment. It's going to be open to registrations, I think over the weekend as we're recording. And it's going to allow people to do exactly what we've done, which is load in all sorts of different data, invite VCs, get recommendations to different VCs, and really start speeding up that process. I should say that the platform is called Envoy, so Smarter.ai Envoy, really because it's like a go-between between the fundraiser and the VC. So it's really all aimed at speeding up processes and getting decisions quicker, so that founders can spend time focusing on the company rather than trying to raise money at all costs.
Well, George, when we post this video, we'll link to it because hopefully there's a few founders out there that are feeling like they're on the torture rack. There's lots of people that are not founders and in startups. So I wondered if we could pick a couple of the questions actually. So let's take imagine we're a VC. I would love it if you could, and you talked about the form filling. So like how do you populate a form? Could you take us through, at the easy end of the scale, what are some of the first questions that sit on those sorts of forms that the language model needs to find, and then have a go at going to the other end for me, where it's like, what would be I see you're finding them for me. What would be a complex question? What would be a complex one where you're like, wow, this is really actually difficult for founders to either triangulate a data point, or what would be like the two ends of the scale, please?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The more straightforward ones. So typically, what will happen is a VC will build like an investment memo, they call it, which is a series of simple questions that they need to have the answers to before they spend time doing the full due diligence. So they can be things like, what's the opportunity? What's the amount that's being raised? What's the USP for the company? All this sort of stuff, that's basically makes this company unique. Those are all quite easy for us to answer. They are typically available, if not on the website, then they'll be available within the business plan and the fundraise details documentation, which is usually sort of the bare minimum that we ask for to get started. Some of the more complicated questions typically come down to data that is lying within Excel, because most financial models are built on Excel. Mm-hmm. So if you want to know, say, what is the projected monthly recurring revenue in months 3, 6, 9, 12, that's a lot more difficult because nobody has a standardized format for this data. So the way that we've approached that is we've built loaders for Excel data that allow the LLM to write us queries on these bigger, more complicated documents that we can then run and then output the answer. So we can get to all of that information just using natural language. And that's really about as complicated as it gets, to be honest, is when you start having to dredge through custom-made Excel documents. That's one of the more difficult things for the VCs and for the founders to do as well.
Yeah, well, George, you've ruined my next question, because I was going to say, hey, what about all these like weird and wacky documents and spreadsheets that you get given? I was about to say, do you set guidance? So actually, to make this work more effectively, you've built your own templates that you've been able to test up front, and then the users of the data room, need to conform to that to get the best results. Is that the right way of thinking of it?
Well, no. So we don't actually require a set format. Basically, what we do, without giving away all the secrets, is we've got two different options that we can take when we're looking at handling Excel data. The first way is if the document or if the sheet of the Excel document is small enough, we can compress that down and load it into the LLM and get the LLM to answer some questions on it for us directly. That doesn't work very often because a lot of these financial models, you're a founder yourself, I'm sure you've seen these, I'm sure you've built these. They are horrifically complicated in a lot of cases. So what we do is we can summarize the data that is in there on like a column by column basis, give the LLM the information that it needs to get a bit of context about each one of those columns, and then say, write me a SQL query that will get this answer. We can then take that query, we can run it on the data ourselves, and then we can output that back into the LLM to say, write me, a summary that isn't just a number. And that then allows us to query all sorts of different Excel documents. Pretty much as long as there's actual data in there and it's not just all color coded, we're pretty good to go.
Super. Yeah, I love what you've done there. And hey, George, you give me way too much credit about having financial planning spreadsheets and these kind of things. Like, I wish. I had one more question actually. Then, so Fran is the CEO at your company. You've been trying to raise money in the past, and it might have sparked this idea. Let's try and take this into an impact, because I've only been on the other side of the data room when I was poking around in someone else's. Never really prepared one myself for another. So, is this some kind of sort of time saving from Fran's perspective, or maybe some of the partners that are testing? Are we talking like 1 million X time saving, or is a 10X? Like, would you be able to give us some early insight as to what you know about it in terms of how it would be, like literally looking at every document, trying to figure it out, versus this question and answering style? Like what kind of what's the difference in rate you can kind of get your early questions answered?
Yeah, so good question. So typically when you go to a VC, you'll send them over to the data room. As I say, they'll have their investment memo that they need to fill out, which will have a variety of different questions in. Usually you'll also have a meeting with them as well, where you can sort of try and guide them to different parts of your data room. But when it comes to actually filling that investment memo out, it's the investment analyst who's doing that work. They may not know the intricacies of your data room, so they may not find the answers that they need. But typically that process can take, a day, 2 days, 3 days, maybe even more, depending on the complexity of the business. So by having this question and answer system, that comes down to, an hour, maybe less. So it's significant time savings for the VC, which means that they can make their decisions quicker. The other thing that we built into the platform is we scan the results that come back from the chat model, and we classify responses as whether or not as being answered or unanswered. So if, for example, they've asked a really difficult question around, what's the market like? What's the market landscape in this industry? And you don't have that in your business plan. What will happen is the model will say, sorry, I don't have enough information to handle that. The person doing the fundraising, so the startup founder, will then get a notification saying this question has been asked by a VC and there wasn't an answer for it. Do you want to go and answer it? So they can then go and manually put in the information that's missing, and basically supplement the LLM with this additional data. So it's time saving for them as well, because it means that they don't have to have 100% coverage of every single memo. They have that opportunity to go in and add things after the fact.
Yeah, and so you've built the thing that means the founder can be proactive overcoming this and keeping the pace. Yeah, instead of it drifting and they're being like, hey, they didn't give this information, I'll come back to them next week. That notification must be pretty powerful. Of like, we've got to get this information to this analyst, otherwise this thing isn't moving forwards. So
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, George, look, I've got good news and bad news for you. The good news is that was great and you survived your first interview with me. The bad news is that we're hitting time. So, George, thanks for taking us through all that. Ladies and gents, this has been ML's Like Team Spirit. We'll see you next time.